Did you know that the Roman Empire was so vast in its reach that Alaska would have fit into it more than 3 times? In 117 AD, the Roman Empire was at its peak, covering a huge surface area of over 5 million square miles. Alaska, the biggest American state, has a surface area of just over 1.7 million square miles, meaning that you could easily fit 3 Alaskas with room for some more into the surface area of the Roman Empire. This is something the Roman Empire learned the hard way. As their empire grew and ballooned, their ruling institutions became more and more ineffective, leaving them open to attack and helping to contribute to the decision to split the empire in 285 AD. This contributed heavily to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The Romans were the first people to invade Britain. Up until 55 BC, Britain was an almost mythical land and most normal people weren't even sure it actually existed. So, with great ambitions, none other than future dictator in perpetuity Julius Caesar decided to invade Britain and gain himself some gold and glory, whilst he was at it. Whilst Caesar's first invasion of Britain was a disastrous military failure and it gained him no riches, it gained him all the glory he needed, as he had not only proved Britain did exist, but had also invaded it. Despite this, it would be nearly 100 years until Britain was actually conquered and became part of the Roman Empire in 43 AD. There were, eventually, 2 Roman empires. The Roman Empire's growth was far from sustainable, and it was because of this rapid growth that Emperor Diocletian decided to split the Roman Empire up in 285 AD. He split the empire into the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire later became known as the Byzantine Empire and covered large swathes of the Middle East. This empire stood strong for over 1,000 more years before its own fall in 1453 AD to the Ottoman Empire. However, the Western Roman Empire didn't do as well as its eastern neighbor, with Rome being sacked in 410 AD, and the empire eventually dissolving altogether in 476 AD. The first ever sack of Rome happened in 410 AD. Ever since the founding of the Roman Empire in the early 750s BC, its capital Rome had never fallen into the hands of an enemy. Some, like Spartacus, came close, but nobody had ever succeeded in such a feat. However, on August 24, 410 AD, Alaric I, king of the Visigoth tribe, a tribe of Germanic peoples living in Eastern Europe, led his army through Rome's Salarian Gate after a series of battles and unsuccessful negotiations, and sacked it. Although definitely not the last time it would happen, this was the first time Rome had ever been captured, let alone sacked. This marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. However, the Western Roman Empire would flail and try ineffectually to recover up until its total dissolution in 476 AD. The Western Roman Empire died in 476 AD. In 476 AD, the Germanic barbarian Odoacer captured the city of Rome and forced the last emperor of Rome, Romulus August, to give up his crown. Odoacer then occupied Rome and declared himself the king of Italy, marking the death of the Western Roman Empire, which had stood for over 1,000 years. After the fall of Rome, the education, government, infrastructure, and culture the Romans had instilled in Europe soon fell apart. With Europe falling into barbarianism and constant war, the next 500 years would be later known as the Dark Ages of Europe. Togas were a sign of wealth, not everyday dress. Whilst most togas were white, some would be a certain color to denote that person's role in society, whereas some had a colored stripe to indicate their role. For example, Roman senators would wear a purple stripe on their toga. Lower-class Roman citizens, or plebs, would usually just wear a woolen tunic. The Romans used a sponge on a stick to wipe their butts. In the communal toilets of the Roman Empire, there would be a bunch of sticks with a sponge on one side which was used to clean up once someone had finished dropping their business. These sticks were known as xylospongiums and would be washed by being rinsed in a bucket of water and salt or vinegar. Needless to say, this wasn't the most hygienic utensil around and is believed to have contributed to the spread of diseases, especially in military camps. The Romans laid down when eating their food. Although originally an ancient Greek custom, the Romans adopted the method of lying down to eat their food. In ancient Greece, the custom was that only upper-class men would lay down to eat, whilst upper-class women and children, and anyone in the lower classes would have to sit up and eat. Unlike the ancient Greeks, however, upper-class Roman women were allowed to lay down whilst eating, and some of the lower-class Romans would lay down to eat. Those who were wealthy enough to afford them were served by their slaves.